Clearly, both are orphan girls with tragic backgrounds, yet they give their all to protect the boy's safety. Even while asleep, she stays close to guard him, simply because she accidentally awakened to the fact that she is a transmigrator. In the original novel, the girl was a disposable villain who was expelled from the orphanage and froze to death on the streets for bullying the male lad Damian. To change her tragic fate, Ellie began her career as Damian's bodyguard. She just needed to hold out until Duke Schuetz came to adopt the male lad. Once the original storyline unfolds and the heroine begins her happy life with him, Ellie can save her own life and regain her freedom. However, the plot starts to deviate in absurd ways. The Duke wants to take her home too. I want her to be my daughter-in-law. In this country, one of the noble's greatest hobbies is adopting orphans. To win favor with the nobility, the orphanage director only accepts children who are good-looking. Ellie was one of them, but because her mother was once a divine head. The nobles despised her, leading to her being abandoned 3 times, until by accident she awakened to her identity as a transmigrator. Familiar with the original novel's plot, she longed to meet one person, the male lad Damian. Damian was once the young master of the Clyde ducal house. Since the Clyde family held immense power and wealth, the emperor gradually grew wary of them and ultimately decided to eliminate them. The Duke and Duchess fell off a cliff and perished. However, it seemed the Clyde Duke had foreseen this day, as he had left a will in advance. He entrusted all his assets to his only friend, Duke Schuetz, for safekeeping. Meanwhile, Duke Schuetz began searching for his lost friend's son, Damian, who went missing during the incident, and today marks Damian's official debut. Having lived as a slave since childhood, Damian had endured endless suffering, his body covered in wounds, malnourished and frail. Seeing him in such a state, Ellie couldn't help but feel sorry for him. The orphanage director gave a brief introduction and then left. The oldest child in the orphanage case stood up aggressively, leading a group of followers ready to initiate the newcomer. In the original story, Ellie was one of them, but this time, to save her own life, she decisively refused Case's invitation. He looked too weak. Noticing the lifeless look in the boy's eyes, Ellie recalled her own experiences of being bullied. She shivered instinctively just as it was time for a meal. Knowing that Damian's days of being bullied were about to begin, Ellie planned to feign ignorance and stay out of it. After all, he was the novel's male lad. With his protagonist halo, he would surely have a bright future. A few beatings wouldn't matter, but while she told herself this, her body instinctively wanted to help. Remembering that hollow gaze, Ellie ultimately decided to step in just this once, never again. When she knocked on the door, she immediately saw Damian slumped on the floor after being beaten. A trace of pity flashed in her eyes. She couldn't help but mock Case, then quickly changed to a smile and made up an excuse, saying the director was calling for them. Case grabbed Damian and issued a few threats before swaggering away with his followers. Only then did Ellie step forward to check his injuries. When she saw him casually wiping away the blood, she quickly stopped him. She pulled out an ointment she had stolen from the director's office to help treat his wounds, but he refused. "It's pointless," he said. "Before the wounds can heal, I'll just get beaten again." Ellie hadn't expected him to understand such a cruel truth at such a young age, that resistance only brought more beatings, and only submission could stop the violence. But she still shoved the ointment into his hands and turned to leave. She had thought reading the novel would make her indifferent to the male lad's suffering. But seeing his pitiful face, so similar to her own, inexplicably made her heart ache. After all, this boy was the son of the richest family in the empire. The days were worse than a dog's life ever since Damian's parents were secretly assassinated by the emperor. As the sole survivor, Damian began a life of darkness and slavery, enduring bullying even in the orphanage. She endured everything silently, trying to survive. During mealtime, Ellie didn't see Damian. Gumayan was a bit worried, fearing the boy might be starving. Ellie specifically saved some bread for him, but after searching everywhere, she couldn't find him. Just then, Case approached with his gang and told Ellie that she had just overheard the orphanage director talking. They said that Damian used to be a slave and had once hunted monsters in complete darkness. With that tiny frames, no way, Ellie, don't tell me you're interested in that guy. Ellie's heart tightened. Case was someone who bullied most of the children in the orphanage. Especially those Ellie showed interest in, he targeted them even more viciously, simply because he had feelings for Ellie. She couldn't let Damian be bullied again. Ellie smiled playfully. "No, I just saw him heading to the warehouse. Maybe the teachers took him for some special treatment. After all, he looks so good, so they favor him, right?" The director even said he could hunt monsters, meaning he must be very strong. Ellie's praise made Case extremely displeased, to prove he was stronger than Damian. Case led his gang toward the warehouse, planning to teach him a lesson, but Ellie stopped him, handing him something. "This is specially for you." This made Case a little embarrassed. He thought it was a gift from his crush, but it was actually a trap. When they arrived at the warehouse and found no sign of Damian, They were caught red-handed by the teachers and accused of stealing, with the bread in their hands serving as undeniable evidence. Severe punishment awaited them. Late at night, when everything was silent, Ellie went out alone to look for Damian. Remembering the rumor that he had once hunted monsters in the dark, she wondered could he be hiding deep in the forest. In the original novel, the Duke once asked Damian why he was so skilled in swordsmanship at such a young age. To survive in the darkness, I had to train relentlessly. Originally, she thought this line was just to emphasize the male lead's tragic upbringing. But when she found him curled up in the forest, she realized it was real. You'll get sick like this. Case and his gang have already been punished by the teachers. You can sleep peacefully tonight, come back with me, but Damian didn't move, that's only temporary, they'll be back tomorrow. I still think it's more comfortable here. Ellie realized Damian had been trapped in a dark abyss of suffering for too long. He would rather endure the freezing snow than be around people, but could anyone truly live like this forever? She promised him they won't come back, and even if they do, they'll disappear soon, I guarantee it. No one will bully you again, looking at the girl's gentle face. Damian felt a moment of daze. The image of Ellie giving him ointment resurfaced in his mind. A warmth he had never felt before wrapped around him. Why are you being so nice to me? Because I want to, it was Ellie's sincere answer. She couldn't let things play out as tragically as they did in the original story. She extended her hand to the boy. Let's go eat. Damian took that hand. As if grasping onto hope of escaping the darkness, the girl quietly led him into the bedroom. Then suddenly told him to take off his clothes, leaving Damian utterly bewildered. I told you to take off your clothes, how else are you going to take a bath? Only the orphanage director's bathroom has hot water. You are out in the snow and are practically frozen. If you don't soak in warm water quickly, you'll get frostbite and your hands and feet will rot. Seeing the boy remain motionless for a long time, Ellie thought he was feeling shy. Unexpectedly, Damian timidly said, my body looks disgusting. If you see it, you'll definitely be scared. Ellie realized what she meant. When she was a slave before, her body must have been covered in scars, right? Ellie held her hand. Your body is not disgusting at all, so you don't need to be upset. We can't waste any more time. If the director comes back, we won't be able to bathe. After saying that, Damian was thrown into the bathroom, her whole body soaking in the hot water. The long-lost feeling of comfort made her completely relax. After she finished washing, Ellie peeked in and asked, feels nice, right? She also brought clean clothes for her to wear, but the size was too big, so they hung loosely on her. Ellie even stole a sandwich from the storage for her, but having lived as a slave since childhood, Damian had never seen one before. This was absolutely outrageous. Just how cruel were those slave traders? How could they treat a child like this? This is called a sandwich, just bite into it directly. Watching Ellie eat with enjoyment, Damian followed her example and took a big bite. What kind of heavenly food is this? Her silly expression made her look like a chubby little puppy. Seeing that Damian's hair was still dripping, Ellie picked up a towel and helped dry it. She even reminded her not to catch a cold. Her caring words made Damian rely on Ellie even more. She even bent down slightly to make it easier for Ellie to dry her hair. Her obedient appearance completely melted Ellie's heart. At that moment, Ellie suddenly noticed. On the side of her neck, there was a scar that looked like a beast bite. Damian explained, it was already there when my master found me, so I always kept my hair long. After hearing this, Ellie only felt sadness. Just how cruel was the world Damian lived in. She lifted the boy's thick bangs, and the moment their eyes met, Ellie was stunned by how breathtaking she looked. That pure face, those deep blue eyes, they were even more beautiful than she had imagined. Seeing Ellie staring at her, Damian blushed slightly. Ellie thought she might have a fever. She hurriedly asked, are you feeling unwell? No, I just feel a little warm. Only then did Ellie feel relieved. After that, she took Damian back to the room. Cassie had been taken away by the teacher and hadn't returned yet, but to prevent her from coming back and bullying Damian. Tonight you'll sleep in my bed with me, sleep here. As the protagonist's bodyguard, the girl was always on duty, even sharing a bed with her. This left Damian completely flustered, under Ellie's urge. She blushed deeply, her whole body stiff as she awkwardly climbed into bed. The moment they got close, Ellie caught a whiff of the scent coming from Damian's body. It smells so nice, maybe just one more sniff. Wait, am I being weird? Ellie quickly said goodnight to Damian, but the girl remained motionless. Aren't you going to say goodnight to me? Damian softly whispered goodnight, then buried herself under the covers. This sight nearly melted Ellie's heart. Soon she fell asleep. Meanwhile, Damian opened her big eyes, quietly watching Ellie. Why is she so nice to me? Is it because of guilt, thinking back on everything Ellie had done for her that day? Am I really not disgusting? When she looked into my eyes, they were so beautiful and bright. But I'm just a slave, I can't have expectations. I must not expect anything. With these thoughts, Damian finally fell asleep, in her dreams. The horrors of her past resurfaced once again. In the darkness, she was all alone. Facing terrifying monsters while her master watched with amusement, eagerly anticipating the fight, no one came to help her. She could only rely on herself to fight the beasts to the death. Damian, Ellie's call finally pulled her out of the nightmare. She gasped for air, panting heavily. Seeing this, Ellie became very worried. "You're sweating so much. Are you sick?" Damian was at a loss. No one had ever cared for her like this before. She grabbed Ellie's hand, stopping her from getting medicine, and insisted that she was fine. The girl gently patted the boy's head, causing Damian to feel something unfamiliar. Her heartbeat quickened as if warmth was spreading through her entire body like sunlight. "If I say I'm not feeling well, will Ellie be even nicer to me?" As she thought this, a sudden loud bang interrupted her. The door was flung open and Case stormed in angrily. "Ellie, you tricked me on purpose, didn't you?" Seeing through Ellie's scheme, Case directed all her anger at Damian. "It's all because of this brat, isn't it?" Ellie stepped in front of Damian. "You got tricked." "Because you're just too stupid." Furious, Case charged forward. "How could you do this to me?" Just then the teacher walked in, catching her bullying red-handed. Case desperately tried to explain. "Ellie started it. She tricked me into going to the storage room yesterday." Seeing the teacher's doubtful gaze, Ellie immediately turned on her acting skills, tears welling up. She looked pitiful and wronged. "Yesterday, Damian was sick. I wanted to ask the teacher for medicine, but Case told me all the teachers went to the casino instead." Tears glistened in Ellie's eyes. "There's no way the teachers would abandon us just to go gambling, right?" Hearing this, the teacher became visibly nervous. Because not only had she been gambling, but she had also been having a secret rendezvous with her lover in the storage room. Seeing Ellie cry even more pitifully and threaten to report to the director, the teacher quickly stopped her. She shifted all the blame onto Case, dragged her outside, and gave her a harsh punishment. Case was beyond frustrated, but no amount of arguing could clear her name. The room fell silent. It seemed Damian wouldn't be bullied anytime soon. Ellie turned to look at the bewildered boy. She grinned proudly. "See, I told you I won't let anyone bully you again." Case, now fuming, was plotting her revenge. But how could she compete with the drama queen in front of her? Just a few tears from Ellie and she had already lost completely. Meanwhile, she could only rage helplessly in confinement. Case clenched her teeth in anger. Yet with her love-struck mind, she didn't blame Ellie at all. No, it had to be that Damian kid stirring up trouble. "Just wait, I'll be the only one Ellie cares about." After the commotion ended, Damian still had a puzzled expression. Ellie reassured him adults should help children. "One day someone will come to help you too. When that happens, trust them. You'll have a happy life." Ellie was hinting at the future arrival of the Grand Duke and the heroine. But to Damian, the angelic Ellie was the true key to her happiness. Ellie had no idea what was going on in Damian's mind. She thought he was just worried about her lying to the teacher earlier. Just as Ellie was about to explain, the boy spoke first. He understood everything. "If you're seeking revenge, you have to be ruthless. I may have lied, but it's much better than suffering silently." She warned Damian, "Don't just endure things quietly and let others push you around." Watching the girl's beautiful side profile, Damian realized it was the first time she had ever heard words like these. All her life, she had only known how to obey her master's every command in order to survive. But now, for Ellie's sake, she made up her mind she would become stronger. Just like Ellie protected her, she would protect Ellie too, and I mean it. The orphanage director woke up with a hangover after a night of partying, opened the door, and saw Damian and Ellie busy in the kitchen. How did this slave end up here working? It turns out that the director had made an agreement with Damian's owner. During her absence, she would help raise the slave and send him back shortly after. If her owner ever found out she had ordered him around, she knew she would be in trouble. Just as the director was about to call Damian, she was interrupted by the noise outside. It turned out that Cassie had sneaked out of the small black room and was caught. She angrily came to find Damian to settle the score. The director asked what had happened, and the teacher explained that Cassie had stolen something from the warehouse and had been arguing about it. The director ordered the teacher to take her away, realizing there was no way to avoid this. "I can't always be the one at a disadvantage," she said, pointing. Actually, Damian also went to the warehouse. "No, Damian didn't go to the warehouse," Ellie quickly interjected. "He was sick at the time and stayed with me in the room." Ellie immediately defended Damian. This surprised the director. Since being abandoned 3 times, Ellie had always kept to herself. It was strange that she would actively speak up for Damian now. In front of the girls, she was obedient and docile, but in front of others, her cruel nature showed. The male lead, the dog, plays double standards, clearly only seeking to monopolize the girls' gentleness. Just then, the director, tired of the kids' disputes, ordered the teacher to handle the situation. She also told them to take Damian away and not let him work anymore. The boy, however, clung tightly to Ellie's clothes. He was reluctant to leave her side until the girl patted his head. "I'll come find you once work is done," Ellie said, and only then did Damian reluctantly follow the teacher. In the noisy cafeteria, Damian squatted alone in the corner, patiently waiting for Ellie to come find him. He didn't want to be alone, but he also didn't want Ellie to dislike him for being too clingy, until he heard Ellie calling him. All the previous discomfort disappeared in an instant. Holding her small hand, he carefully asked if he could sit next to her. Just then, Tommy suddenly appeared, exerting her strong powers as a third wheel. "The seat next to Ellie is mine," she said. She had been sitting there before Damian arrived. Damian, furious, asked, "Who are you? Are you trying to take care of the new arrival? Ellie would let a handsome boy like me sit there, right?" Tommy immediately gave up the seat. "I'll give it to you because I'm the most handsome man," she said, looking at Damian's youthful face, thinking he was just a pure and kind kid. At that moment, a girl's crying voice was heard. It turned out she had accidentally dirtied her doll while eating. The girl told them to eat first while she went to comfort the doll. "Don't worry, the toy is just a little wet." "I'll go clean it up for you, sister," Ellie said, leaving. Damian fell silent again as he watched her leave. Tommy took the initiative to introduce herself, but Damian just gave her a cold glance and turned away. Tommy thought she was scared and explained, "I'm Ellie's good friend. We can all play together in the future." However, as soon as Damian heard good friend, his gaze immediately turned cold and he stared at Tommy with a gloomy look. Tommy felt the temperature around her drop sharply. Just then, Ellie returned and asked Damian if he had eaten well. The boy, who had been sulking, immediately became obedient and nodded like a chicken pecking at rice. He ate obediently in big mouthfuls, and Tommy's expression was like she had seen a ghost. But Damian's warning gaze made her too scared to say anything more, though she couldn't help but silently complain. "This kid is not innocent at all, he's simply a fierce beast." "Ellie, you've been terribly deceived. The boy is clearly someone who could take down a monster. But he pretends to be a well-behaved little puppy in front of the girl, just to become someone special in her heart." That day, after Damian finished his bath, Ellie helped him dry his hair as usual. Looking at his little pouty face, she really wanted to indulge him, but then she thought, what if his face is noticed by some noble and taken away? That can't happen. According to the original plot, Damian's adoptive father must be a person of shame, so before they meet, no one should see his beauty. The two returned to the bedroom to prepare for bed. Ellie pointed to a bed next to the wall and told Damian he would sleep there from now on. Damian didn't quite get it. "Does that mean we can't sleep together?" The boy's mood immediately dropped. He stayed silent for a while, then slowly climbed into his own bed, his mood very low. He felt like a dog rejected by its owner. Ellie thought he was just tired. As usual, she said goodnight and wished him sweet dreams. Damian thought for a moment. "I wish you sweet dreams too," he replied, which made Ellie feel unexpectedly happy. This was the first time Damian had called her name. Just hearing his words made her so happy. In the middle of the night, Ellie got up to use the bathroom. But she found Damian was gone. By the side, a doll was being hugged anxiously. "Brother Cassie is back." Ellie heard this and immediately realized something was wrong. And indeed it was. At that moment, Cassie, along with some others, was surrounding Damian and beating him up. After holding in his frustration for days, he finally got the chance to lash out. "I'll tell you, you mean nothing," to Ellie. Hearing this, Damian's eyes turned cold and terrifying. He stared intensely at Cassie. Recalling Ellie's words to him that he should no longer tolerate being bullied, the boy clenched his fists, ready to fight back. But Cassie's words made him freeze. "Ellie would only feel sorry for someone weak and useless like you. Don't flatter yourself into thinking you're special. She only pities you." These words shattered Damian's heart. He was used to such hurtful words from his days as a slave, but hearing that he meant nothing to Ellie made him feel suffocated, as if trapped in mud. Damian's heart was like dead ashes. He had already given up on resisting. Cassie continued her assault, grabbing Damian by the hair. She shoved him into the lake. Damian mumbled Ellie's name as he sank. In the next second, Ellie rushed forward, grabbing Damian. The girl, unable to hide her anger, stared at Cassie. "What are you doing?" When Ellie woke up, she found that the boy was gone. Upon learning that Cassie had taken him away, Ellie quickly ran to the lakeside. This was Cassie's usual trick. Whenever she hated someone, she'd push them into the lake. Ellie felt defeated but was relieved to see Damian. At the critical moment, she rushed over to pull him up. Ellie angrily questioned Cassie, "Are you insane? How could you do something so life-threatening?" Cassie felt wronged. To her, Ellie had changed. Not only had she stopped bullying others for fun, but she also treated Damian with kindness and care. This change made Cassie incredibly jealous of Damian. The more she thought about it, the angrier she became, raising her fist and charging at Damian. Ellie, quick to act, caught Damian in her arms and jumped aside, but Cassie, unable to stop herself, ended up falling into the water instead. Ellie first asked about Damian's condition. After confirming he was fine, she quickly took his hand and walked away. Only Cassie and her lackeys were left standing there stunned. This was Damian's first time seeing Ellie this angry. Why? Was it because he had caused her trouble? With this thought, he released her hand. But Ellie turned around and asked him why he hadn't resisted. The sadness in Damian's eyes was about to overflow. "So you're really mad at me?" Damian asked desperately. "Did you only take care of me because you pity me? If that's the case, then forget it. I'm used to this kind of life." This made Ellie panic, she quickly explained. She didn't think he was weak. On the contrary, she felt he was stronger than anyone else. It was the first time someone had used the word strong to describe her. She had mentally prepared herself. But at that moment, Damian still shed tears. Thankfully, Ellie didn't hate her. All the grievances exploded in an instant. Seeing Damian cry, Ellie panicked and kept explaining over and over. She even made a promise with him, swearing that she would never hate or reject him. Damian truly held Ellie's hand. From now on, he would always hold her hand. When they ate, he would sit next to her. Ellie once again reminded him not to sit idly by when being bullied. He should bravely fight back and not overthink things. On their way back to the orphanage, Damian recalled Ellie's words. "There will always be someone to help you. Please trust her when that time comes." He felt like he was crying but also happy. Maybe this was what happiness felt like. In the dim room, cold bodies lay scattered on the floor. A man was returning his bloody sword to its scabbard. This man was none other than the disgraced Duke, who had been searching for Damian. Due to incorrect information, he had to clean up some trash, and now he would move on to search the next area. The boy had a fever of 49 degrees C, but he insisted he wasn't sick and didn't want to worry the girl. Thinking back to the night before when Damian was almost pushed into the lake by Cassie. Luckily, Ellie had arrived just in time. When they returned, Damian transformed into a pitiful little puppy. Requesting to sleep in the same bed with Ellie, claiming he would have nightmares and couldn't sleep otherwise. Ellie was worried that the bed was too small and that she might crowd Damian, but when she saw the boy's pitiful face, she softened. Looking at the boy beside her, his face radiating happiness. Ellie felt very pleased and teasingly said, "It's like we're siblings lying together." But Damian replied, "I'm not your little brother. You're only 11 and I'm 13. I'm not your little brother." Hearing this, Damian fell silent. Ellie, seeing the boy's displeased face, thought he hated being seen as a child and hurriedly comforted him. "Actually, sleeping with you feels really warm." This made Damian blush instantly. He stammered, "Me too." The two little ones wished each other good night and fell asleep, perhaps with Ellie's company. Damian happily played with Ellie in his dreams. He was sincerely grateful to her. "Having you by my side is really wonderful." But the next day, Damian developed a fever. The thermometer had broken, but the boy stubbornly endured. This made Ellie feel guilty for not taking better care of him. She told Damian to rest well and that she would return to accompany him once she finished her work, although Damian really didn't want Ellie to leave. He could only obediently agree, not wanting to worry her. Ellie cleaned the director's office. She planned to steal some samples when the director was gone and take them back for Damian. But today, the director seemed in a bad mood. Seeing Ellie dawdling, she immediately scolded her and kicked her out. It turned out that the orphanage's finances were in trouble and had been losing money, which put a lot of pressure on her. The director looked at the cabinet where the zero-interest bonds were kept. Was she going to sell these treasures for money? She really couldn't bear to. She turned around and looked at Ellie with a face full of disgust. If Ellie weren't the daughter of a thief, she could sell for a large sum to help pay off the debt. At that moment, a teacher came to report to the director. The Duke of Hughes would visit each aristocratic family that had adopted children to confirm if they were indeed the son of her close friend, Duke Clyde. The aristocrats, afraid of encountering her, dared not come to adopt children. She had followed the director's instructions and spread the news that Duke Clyde's son was here. Soon the Duke of Hughes would arrive, but the teacher was a little scared. What if they were found out? Would the Duke kill them? The director scoffed. The Duke had never seen the child and only knew it was a black-haired boy, so he wouldn't recognize him. At this moment, Ellie, who overheard this conversation, couldn't control her accelerating heartbeat. The man she had been waiting for was finally coming. She was going to save Damian. The man had searched the entire empire to find the son of his deceased friend. He even visited every noble family that had adopted orphans to confirm if they had the black-haired boy. One day, the Duke received a lead and arrived at Damian's former master's house. However, the woman mistook him for a regular rich man who was planning to rob and kill her. It looked like his life was in danger. The woman hurriedly told him that the child he was looking for was currently at the orphanage and that she had received a letter a few days ago. The letter confirmed that the child was indeed at the nearby sacred orphanage, rather than an orphanage. It was essentially a place for trafficking children and conducting dirty deals. The Duke couldn't wait any longer. He immediately set off toward the orphanage, unaware that disaster was about to strike the orphanage director. Upon learning the Duke was coming, the director became anxious because several children were sick. She couldn't let the Duke see the sickly children. With no other choice, the director planned to reluctantly sell a spirit stone. She intended to give it to the children to ease their suffering just for show, but when she opened the cabinet, she was stunned. Some spirit stones were missing. Meanwhile, Ellie was taking care of the feverish Damian. She was about to get some water to wipe the boy's face. Though he was delirious from the fever, Damian still clung to her, not letting her leave. Ellie comforted Damian. She had originally planned to secretly use a spirit stone whose energy might make Damian feel better. But now it seemed it wasn't working, as the boy's red face nuzzled against her. Ellie was suddenly struck with a plan. After a long wait, when Damian finally fell asleep, Ellie seized the opportunity to run out to get water, not noticing the director suddenly appearing behind her. "What are you doing?" the director asked sternly. Ellie instantly put on a smile and responded, "Damian's sick, so I'm taking care of her." To her surprise, the director took the spirit stone from her pocket. "So you stole this for Damian, didn't you?" Ellie, as a person who had transmigrated, was not flustered in the slightest. She pretended to be clueless, awkwardly laughing and saying she had taken it from Cassie. The director was not so easily fooled. "Such shamelessness, no wonder you're the daughter of a thief." These words struck Ellie's sore spot. The director looked pleased with herself and was about to teach Ellie a lesson. But just as she raised her hand to slap, the slap landed on Damian's face. It turned out that at the critical moment, Damian had stepped in front of Ellie. The boy glared at the director. "If you dare hit Ellie, I will not let you go." Because she was the daughter of a thief, the girl was disliked by everyone. Even the orphanage director despised her background. Only Damian saw her as an angel in his life. When the director was beating the girl, Damian stood up to protect her. "If you dare hit Ellie, I will not let you go." The boy's aggressive appearance left the director somewhat at a loss. At this moment, the teacher hurriedly ran over and said, "Duke Schuetz will be arriving soon." The director didn't expect him to be so early and ordered the teacher to immediately take the black-haired, blue-eyed child to the office. After leaving a threatening remark, the director turned and walked away, but Ellie stopped him. "What about Damian? He's also black-haired and blue-eyed. Are you deliberately trying to make me look bad by sending a sickly child to meet the Duke?" Ellie tried to argue, but Damian, exhausted, passed out. The director sneered and left the two behind. Ellie, holding the unconscious boy, made a firm decision. "I will definitely let you meet your family." Meanwhile, the Duke arrived at the orphanage, but only a few teachers were there to greet him. The Duke observed his surroundings. This orphanage was almost isolated from the world, and he sensed that something wasn't right. The Duke directly asked where the children were. The teachers stammered for a while. The Duke decided to go in himself to search. He had just turned the corner when he bumped into a little girl. This girl was Ellie. The Duke crouched down and apologized. His vision met Ellie's clear green eyes. This caused the Duke to pause in surprise. Ellie pretended not to know her identity. She asked if he was there to adopt children and cheerfully told him that there were 5 black-haired, blue-eyed boys in the office. The girl's lively and cheerful demeanor attracted the attention of Entai. There had been someone like her in the past, someone who wasn't afraid of the Duke, but that was a long time ago. Once they arrived at the director's office, the children screamed and cried when they saw the Duke. The director swore that the child the Duke was looking for was definitely here. The Duke took out a power stone containing the child's magic, but the stone showed no response. The director had been lying to him, and the Duke immediately ordered Entai to strike the director. The director, seeing the situation was turning bad, still insisted that the child was among the 4 boys, but the girl had just said there were 5 children. The Duke swiftly moved in, pressing his sword against the director's neck. "Where is the child you've been hiding? If you lie, I'll kill you right here." The man raised his sword to the orphanage director's neck, all because of the girl's words. He was determined to find his long-lost son, and at this moment Ellie felt deeply moved. The Duke was finally going to take Damian away, but after all these days of getting to know him, she felt a little reluctant. She told the feverish boy, "From now on, you won't be sick anymore." The boy didn't understand the meaning of her words until a strange, tall man walked into the room. The Duke's excited appearance surprised Entai. It was the first time he had seen the Duke like this since his wife passed away. The Duke first saw the frail Damian, then noticed Ellie standing next to him. "Isn't this the child I bumped into earlier?" Perhaps because the Duke's gaze was too probing. Damian, struggling to stay upright, stood in front of Ellie, still warning the man despite his shaky body. "If you dare bully Ellie, no matter who you are, I won't let you go." Just then, the power stone suddenly reacted. Powerful spiritual energy surged. The Duke confirmed that he had finally found his friend Clyde's son. At this moment, Damian suddenly fainted. The Duke explained that it was because he was absorbing the stolen spiritual energy. This would help strengthen his body. Ellie touched Damian's forehead, and indeed, Damian had cooled down. The Duke had found the child and was ready to settle accounts. He questioned the teachers about why the child was in such a state. The teachers immediately ran to find the director. Ellie looked at the man, and he really did have the powerful aura described in the book. The Duke watched Ellie, who was busy taking care of the boy, and felt that this girl seemed to know in advance that he was coming. Ellie knew that the Duke was deeply calculating, so she cautiously explained. It's because I had heard from the director before about you looking for the 5 children involved in the illegal plot. You deliberately told me about it, didn't you? Ellie admitted it. The Duke asked her why she didn't just bring Damian to him directly. Ellie had her reasons. She wanted the Duke to first see for himself the harsh environment the children lived in at the orphanage. All the work was done by the children themselves, and the teachers would go to the casino at night, leaving the children uncared for. The girl's determined gaze seemed so familiar to him, causing the Duke to pause in surprise. At that moment, the director was brought in. The Duke went straight to the point and said, I want to adopt this child. Then he looked at the child next to Ellie. I'll adopt this one too. I want her to be my daughter-in-law. The man was adopting children with a buy one, get one free offer. Not only would he take the boy as his son, but he also wanted to take the girl beside him as his daughter-in-law. Ellie was no longer calm. This wasn't like what was written in the original story. Damian's future wife should be the female protagonist, but seeing the boy in his sleep still calling her name. She also realized that she was very reluctant to part with him. The thought of not having to say goodbye made her quite happy. However, the director wasn't willing. If Ellie left with the Duke, she would definitely expose the issue about the children, and then Ellie's life would be in danger. The director directly exposed Ellie's background, saying this brat is the daughter of a notorious thief. Her mother was the thief who stole clothes from Count Ladio's estate. It turned out that Ellie's mother, as a thief, had caused a stir in the past. She had once evaded layers of guards and sneaked into the palace to steal the emperor's treasures but was never caught. It wasn't until later, when she was found in the count's house, that she took her own life. The director exhausted her words in the hope that the Duke would abandon adopting Ellie. But the Duke didn't want to hear any more. When did I ask for your guidance? The man suddenly knelt down on one knee and asked the girl, the choice is yours. Will you come with me? Looking into the man's sincere eyes, Ellie made a condition. Please dismiss all the teachers here, even if you adopt Damian and me. The remaining children will still suffer here. I hope you will punish these irresponsible teachers. Arrange for responsible people to care for these orphans. Don't let these children be treated like commodities to be bought and sold. The Duke agreed to this readily. At this point, the director was completely panicked. She no longer had a chance to speak and was dragged away to be dealt with. The Duke handled things swiftly. Ellie didn't expect him to agree so easily. At this moment, the Duke extended his hand to the girl once again. Will you come with me? Okay, I'm willing. Although she didn't know the reason why the Duke adopted her, Ellie felt very reassured to always be by Damian's side, and she would continue to protect him. Until she met the true female lead after everything had been arranged. Ellie packed her bags and prepared to leave. Looking at the orphanage where she had lived for many years, Ellie sincerely felt happy for the children here. They could finally live a comfortable and peaceful life. The children Ellie had been taking care of came out to see her off, reluctantly bidding her farewell. Seeing the girl's sincere smile, the Duke's doubt disappeared. He had originally thought this child was a spy planted by the Emperor. But seeing how Ellie truly cared for these orphans, the image of that woman resurfaced in his mind, and he felt a sense of déjà vu. At this moment, Damian, who had been hiding behind a tree, was noticed by the Duke. Damian was very wary of this man. Why do you want to take Ellie and me away? What do you want to do with us? The Duke wanted to adopt the boy as his son, but Damian was vehemently against it. This was because in his eyes, all adults were sly and terrifying. He had previously been a slave, a mere plaything for his master. Now he could never let Ellie face the same fate. Damian questioned the Duke, asking why he wanted to take them away. In reality, the Duke wanted Damian to return to his rightful position. As the young master of the Clyde family, he was determined to take back everything that belonged to him. Although Damian appeared to be a fierce little beast now, once he returned to his rightful place, he would be able to protect the people he cared about. Ellie had promised to stay by his side. He would protect Ellie well. Damian threatened the Duke, saying, "You're not allowed to make Ellie do any chores." Absolutely not. The Duke was speechless. What do you take me for? If you dare to bully Ellie, I will never let you off. After delivering his harsh words, Damian turned and left, leaving the Duke seething with anger. This kid was just like his father. He only acted cute in front of those he liked, but in front of others he bared his teeth. How could these two father and son be so similar? The carriage back to the city was moving slowly. The two little ones were leaning against each other, drowsy. Suddenly, a sound outside the carriage window startled Ellie. A group of crows stood with ominous stares on the bare tree branches. The surrounding gloomy and oppressive atmosphere sent chills down his spine. Had the monsters already spread everywhere? A crow was flapping outside the window, its eyes locking with Ellie's. Ellie, frightened, quickly turned her head and refused to look at it. She wasn't sure how long it lasted. The carriage stopped outside a magnificent castle. Ellie couldn't help but exclaim, "It's so wonderful." But then she noticed the crows circling in the air and she froze for a moment. The butler had been waiting for a long time when he learned that the Duke had also brought back the little actress. He found it absurd and couldn't help but sigh. This made Ellie think that she was once again being disliked. She remembered how, when she was first adopted, she had been showered with love. But when they found out she was the daughter of a thief, the disgust on their faces had truly broken her heart. Now she was here only for Damian, and she had become immune to those words. But the butler then changed his tone. "You didn't tell me in advance, so I didn't prepare any maidservants to serve the young lady." This surprised Ellie. She quickly said that she could take care of herself. She didn't want these people to think of her as a burden. This was when Anti told the Duke that Jia Cheng and the other members of the side faction were waiting. It seems that Damian's return has already become common knowledge, although the Duke has adopted Damian now. It was a long time before they truly became close, family-like figures to each other. Before that, those who assisted and guided Damian were the companions along his path of growth. Ellie would absolutely not allow Damian to have any misfortune. When the girl saw her room for the first time, she couldn't help but exclaim, "Oh my God!" The luxurious decor and exquisite arrangements, along with the 10-meter-wide soft bed, all reflected the two words, wealth. Ellie was deeply shocked. She turned around to pull Damian in but saw 4 maids waiting behind her. The head maid, Roina, introduced, "Young Master Damian is with the housekeeper. From today, we are your maids." Ziona, Zioye, and Zio Shah all greeted Ellie gently. Ellie politely bowed and returned the greeting. It was the first time in her life she had been served by so many people, so she felt a little uneasy. The maids, in turn, were charmed by Ellie's cuteness. Everything was ready. Ellie was about to bathe. The thought of her malnourished body being exposed made her a little shy. But she still decided to go ahead with confidence and not let the maids look down on her. Zio Shah asked if Ellie liked any particular kind of scented oil. Ellie had never heard of scented oil for baths. As long as there was hot water, that was enough. After all, the water at the orphanage was always too cold. Upon hearing this, everyone fell silent. Ellie thought she might have said something wrong. The head maid spoke with a hint of sympathy. "We will try our best to find the scented oil you like. Please don't be too polite with us. We will serve you diligently until you become impatient with us." After finishing her bath, Ellie finally lay down on the bed. Although someone helped her bathe, it took more time than if she had done it herself. Feeling refreshed, Ellie rolled around contentedly. But she bumped into Damian, who was sleeping soundly nearby. The boy, with his hair cut short, looked even softer and cuter. Meanwhile, in the meeting room, the family officials of the Hughes family and the Crabs were in a state of panic. They had a lot of objections about Damian's return, originally after the death of Duke Clyde. He had entrusted his trading group to Duke Hughes, and the Hughes family had managed the business for 11 years, making a lot of money. Now to return it all to a mysterious little boy, they were naturally very unwilling, especially the Purple Duke. He absolutely couldn't let the prize slip away. While they were discussing, the Duke arrived. He opened the door and said directly, "I have found Clyde's son." The officials congratulated the Duke but immediately asked, "Does this mean the boy is now the head of Clyde's family?" Of course not. Damian still lacks the ability to control the family. If he returns to his family now, he will surely be eaten alive by those relatives. The Duke changed the subject and said, "This time I also brought back a clever and bright girl. I plan to teach them with all my effort until they are qualified to inherit the Clyde family name." This caused a stir among the officials. Why should they cultivate their future competitors? However, the strong opposition couldn't shake the Duke's resolve. "I have already decided to adopt them, and I will arrange for them to marry." It turns out the Duke had already considered it. In order to seize control of the trading group, these people would stop at nothing. They planned to either drive Damian away or arrange for their own family's girl to marry him, but as long as the Duke arranged Damian's marriage partner properly, then these vassals will never be able to occupy what originally belonged to Damian. The girl told the boy, "We will become a couple in the future." But the boy was confused and didn't understand the meaning of love. Ellie didn't know how to explain either. It's when you see your lover, your heart feels fluttery and your body becomes hot like you have a fever. Her heart also beats faster, Damian suddenly realized. "Is what I feel for Ellie, love." The boy was so nervous that he kept stuttering. He hurriedly avoided the girl's concerned inquiry. Ellie thought that Damian was scared. She pinched the boy's red face. Damian stammered, "I'm just too hot." To her surprise, the girl immediately pulled away. "Then I'll stay further away from you. Anyway, the bed is big enough." Damian instantly felt dejected. No, he didn't want to be separated from Ellie. Seeing the boy's silence, Ellie wondered, "Are you afraid you'll have nightmares again like last time?" Her words hit home for Damian. To comfort his anxious emotions, Ellie gently pulled Damian into her embrace. "This way you won't have nightmares. Close your eyes and sleep well. Good night." Damian in his dream of the vast starry sky. Snuggled up to her and they had a peaceful night's sleep, but there were always dirty ambitions quietly growing in the shadows. The Viscount sent spies to gather information, learning that Ellie's mother was a thief who had stolen the Emperor's treasures. He chuckled. A mysterious little brat and the daughter of a lowly thief, they're truly a perfect match. These two little brats think they can take away what I've worked so hard for all these years. I must get rid of that thief's daughter. A vicious scheme quickly took shape. The next morning, Ellie was woken up and dressed. Today was the day she and Damian would meet with the elders and vassals. Ellie in a pink gown looked even sweeter and cuter. The maids were also conquered by her beauty, but Ellie felt that being served by others was more exhausting than before. She sat on the couch waiting for Damian. At that moment, the Viscount suddenly knocked and entered. Ignoring the maid's objections, he barged in, looking down at Ellie with disdain, his whole demeanor radiating arrogance. Ellie knew the visitor wasn't friendly and put on a smile, greeting him politely. The Viscount said he had come to present Ellie with a treasure as a gift, a rare blue spirit stone, very expensive and hard to find. This was exactly the tool the Viscount planned to use to frame Ellie. Since she's the daughter of a thief, why not let everyone see her stealing? The man smiled on the surface, but in his heart he had evil intentions. Early in the morning, he came to flatter Ellie with a dazzling spirit stone. He had also dismissed the maids, leaving no one else present. The Viscount immediately revealed his true face. "Stop looking, this isn't something you can covet," Ellie said helplessly. "I knew you weren't this kind-hearted, but I'm generous. You want to look? Go ahead and look to your heart's content," she said, handing the stone to the nearby maid. After speaking, the Viscount left on his own, leaving Ellie feeling confused. At this time, the head maid told her it was getting late and they had to leave. Ellie stood up, ready to head out. But the Viscount's maid had a mission. The Viscount had instructed her to find a chance to put the spirit stone into Ellie's pocket. The maid held the stone in her hand. Pretending to sprain her ankle, she accidentally fell toward Ellie. In the chaos, she slipped the stone into Ellie's pocket with a smooth, flawless motion. The head maid was too focused on asking if Ellie had been hurt, and it seemed that Ellie hadn't noticed anything unusual. She walked up to the maid and asked if she was hurt, even helping her brush off the dust from her clothes. After confirming there was no issue, they set off to the meeting hall. Ellie introduced herself to the vassals. "My name is Ellie." However, she was mocked as a common girl without even a surname. Damian was very angry. But he was stopped by the Duke, who told him that it was best to stay quiet and not cause trouble before Ellie had the ability to do so. At that moment, Ziju arrived late. As soon as she entered, she proposed to show the Duke the precious spiritual power stone. The maid, however, whispered something in her ear. "What? The spiritual power stone is missing?" Ziju deliberately raised her voice. Everyone in the room was drawn to the commotion and the maid stammered. Actually, the young lady didn't return it after admiring it. The implication was that Ellie had stolen it. Ziju seemed to have anticipated this and seized the opportunity to reveal Ellie's background. Her mother is a notorious thief. Upon hearing this, the vassals immediately erupted in outrage. They couldn't accept the idea of the daughter of a thief living here. The Duke, however, understood everything. "So you're putting on a show for me." But Ziju pressed on, getting even bolder. She suggested they search Ellie's body for stolen goods. The man, in an attempt to seize a massive fortune, framed the girl, wanting to kick her out of the noble family. He had first instructed the maid to steal the precious gemstone and place it in the girl's pocket. Then, in front of everyone, he accused her of being a thief and insisted on searching her for stolen goods. Ellie trembled with fear. She explained that she hadn't stolen the gemstone, but Ziju insisted on confirming it on the spot. Seeing that her explanation had no effect, Ellie reluctantly agreed but demanded an apology if no gemstone was found. Ziju signaled to the maid to search her. The maid searched Ellie thoroughly, but couldn't find any sign of the gemstone. "It can't be. I clearly put it in there," the maid reluctantly told Ziju. This made the man furious. He personally stepped forward to search but still found no gemstone. The people present began to murmur. They started to doubt whether Ziju's accusation was true or not. The man, enraged, grabbed Ellie and demanded to know where she hid the gemstone. Damian wanted to step in and save her, but Ziju's hand had already been restrained. It was the Duke. "What are you doing? I think you're the one who is the biggest suspect here." The Duke ordered Anti to search Ziju. 1 second, Ziju was confident, but the next, she was shocked. The gemstone was found in her own pocket. Ziju couldn't explain herself and cried out that she was wronged. "What's going on here?" she asked, genuinely confused. But Ellie knew it was all part of his plan. Although the gemstone was very light, Ellie had noticed it when the maid put it in her pocket. After the maid fell, Ellie went to check on her and subtly placed the gemstone back into her pocket. When the maid searched her, Ellie secretly took the gemstone out and placed it into Ziju's pocket when he came to search. Everything about the two fools' actions was expected by Ellie. Trying to frame me? No way, because of this farce. Ziju and the maid faced a brutal end. Ellie didn't want to watch this, but without being ruthless, she couldn't protect herself. Her future would be even more dangerous. The vassals who had mocked Ellie before began to feel some fear. They all knelt down and apologized to her. The Duke temporarily decided not to pursue the matter further. The meeting was about to begin. The Duke had previously mentioned that Ellie and Damian should get married, but the law forbade marriage between nobles and commoners. So in order to raise Ellie's status, the Duke planned to find a family to adopt her as a foster daughter. When these words were spoken, Ellie and her subordinates were all stunned. Which noble would adopt the daughter of a thief? The girl had been despised and insulted by nobles since childhood, bullied because she was the daughter of a lowly thief. Yet now she was being taken home by the most prestigious Duke of the Empire. She was to become his adopted son's fiancée, even going so far as to clean up her background. To wash away her origins, they would make her dance in front of a noble family, giving her a surname, making her a legitimate noble young lady. At this moment, the maid reported that Madame Amanta Nan's condition had suddenly worsened. Upon hearing this, the Duke panicked. He hurriedly excused himself and left. Ellie only felt that the name sounded somewhat familiar. She remembered that the house of Duke Amanta Nan owned a small mine. There was a kind of mineral from that mine that was made into a sword. In the 8 efforts, Damian had used that sword to win the war. In an area ravaged by monsters, weapons were equivalent to money. Ellie decisively chose the house of Duke Amanta Nan. The Duke kindly reminded her that getting Madame Nan to accept her through the trick she just played would not work. Ellie suddenly jolted in shock. Did the Duke realize the tactic she had just used on the Purple Duke? Then why didn't he expose her on the spot? Was it because she had helped him find Damian, someone useful to him? If that's the case, then the Duke was the only person who recognized her abilities. Ellie's face was filled with determination. I will prove my worth. A few days later, Ellie and Damian arrived at the greenhouse garden to play. Damian was immediately drawn to the dandelions. She saw the ground covered with blooming flowers. Eagerly, she called Ellie over. This flower looks just like your hair color. Ellie smiled happily, pointing to the blue flowers beside her. Your eyes are this clear blue color, aren't they beautiful? Damian gazed at Ellie's innocent smile. Ellie told her she would soon be adopted. Damian hastily asked, does that mean I won't see you again? Ellie comforted her, saying that she would only be taking the surname and that they wouldn't be separated. Damian finally relaxed. The boy's sweet smile was so charming, thinking that Damian would start school the next day. The two of them decided to play and have fun today, playing hide-and-seek. The happy moments always seemed so short, and soon it was dusk. After playing joyfully, the two were out of breath, just about to head back. A strange noise came from the small forest, and suddenly a large black shadow appeared in front of them. The two little ones were so absorbed in their game that they lost track of time. At this moment, the strange noise came again from the small forest. If nothing unexpected happened, something unexpected was about to occur. Sure enough, a large black shadow flashed. Ellie tightly protected Damian, but the danger she had imagined did not occur. Instead, a woman was sitting on the ground, shivering, muttering, so scared, so cold. Ellie walked up to her and asked, Grandma, are you okay? Seeing her clothes, Ellie could tell she wasn't just a commoner. She planned to help her back to the greenhouse garden, but when she touched her, she froze. The woman's body was as cold as ice, and her emotions were unstable. Acting rashly would surely cause problems. Ellie enthusiastically introduced herself and asked the woman's name, but the woman was disoriented, unable to recall it for a long time. Ellie suddenly realized, could she be suffering from Roman's disease? Patients with this illness gradually lose their memory, eventually becoming senile, and it's an incurable condition. Ellie took off her scarf and gave it to the woman, telling her there was a warm place nearby full of flowers. The woman became interested. Ellie and Damian helped her back to the greenhouse gardens. The woman's condition seemed to have improved a lot. She had no memory of why she ended up in the woods. Just as she was about to murmur to herself and say her name, an anxious young man approached. Biella, how did you end up here? Do you know how long I've been looking for you? Ellie turned around to see who it was. To her surprise, it was Baron Amanta, so this lady must be the Baroness. Biella called out the Baron's name, apologizing for getting lost. The Baron, though scolding, spoke in a gentle tone. But the next moment, his gaze toward Ellie turned angry and annoyed. Although I don't know what you're scheming, please don't use my wife's illness to manipulate me. Ellie felt a bit wronged by the Baron. This was a misunderstanding. She had only intentionally approached his wife. Damian, who was strong and fit, immediately defended Ellie. Please speak to Ellie more kindly. A kind person wouldn't treat Ellie so harshly. Damian's reaction startled Ellie. She quickly recalled the story of the original world. The Baron would become Damian's teacher, and right now, Damian couldn't be so rude to his future teacher. Ellie hurriedly stopped Damian, telling him not to be so tense. Seeing the young master so obedient to her, the Baron couldn't help but retort sarcastically. This little girl is really good at winning people's hearts, but I'm not falling for it. I will not accept you as an adopted daughter, so please stay away from my wife. After saying that, he supported his wife and walked away, leaving Ellie standing there in disbelief. She didn't expect the Baron to dislike her so much. But it didn't matter if he disliked her. Disliking Damian was a different matter. Ellie tried to persuade Damian not to be so wary of everyone. Damian didn't understand. Didn't you say that we should bravely fight back when others bully us? That person just bullied you, so isn't it the same as bullying me? Did I do something wrong by fighting back? Seeing the boy looking so pitiful and aggrieved, Ellie couldn't bring herself to scold him. Damian had just learned to open his heart. She absolutely couldn't let him shut himself off again, so she switched to praise mode. Damian, you did great. The boy immediately smiled happily. Damian just wasn't good at interacting with others, but with proper guidance, he would be able to differentiate various emotions. To be on the safe side, Ellie still told him, next time we encounter a situation like this, when I stop you, you have to obey and stop right away. Damian was very obedient, and Ellie thought he was even more adorable now. Just then, a maid rushed over in a hurry. The maid loudly called their names. The girl had kindly helped the amnesiac woman. But the woman's husband misunderstood and thought she had other motives. Even the maid advised Ellie to stay away from the Baroness. After all, if she lost her memory, they didn't know what uncontrollable actions she might take. Ellie asked about the reason for the Baroness's illness. It turned out that the Baroness had been fine when she was younger. But after she gave birth to her son, her health began to deteriorate. Ellie felt a little worried, wondering if the illness couldn't be cured. In the evening, the Baron couldn't help but complain again. I arranged so many attendants to follow her, so why did she still wander off and get lost? Looking at his sick wife. The Baron began to feel guilty. I was so hopeful when she was pregnant. But life after the birth of the child has been nothing but painful. This illness is incurable in the Empire. The Baroness's condition grew worse, until one time the Baron found his unconscious wife on the edge of a cliff. She had collapsed. After all, it was the Baron who had initially suggested having a child. But this trapped Biella, who loved freedom more than anyone else. Could it be that she wanted to forget all of this? Looking at her husband, who had a troubled expression, Biella tried to comfort him. Today, luckily, that blonde girl helped me. She gave me a scarf and took me to a warm place. Otherwise, I'd still be out there shivering from the cold. She's really a kind little angel. The genuine smile from his wife stunned the Baron. How long had it been since she had smiled like this? Biella held her husband's hand and wanted to go with her tomorrow to see those two children. Then we could apologize to them, okay? Though the Baron didn't believe that Ellie's kindness was sincere. He couldn't help but feel his heart grow heavier seeing the hopeful expression on his wife's face. After a long silence, he nodded in agreement. Ellie was busy pinching Damian's small face, enjoying the soft, bouncy feel just like cotton candy. Seeing Damian's shy expression, Ellie took his hand and placed it on her face. How about this? The suddenness made Damian's mind go blank. Just then the head maid came in to announce. Baron Amanta and the Baroness have arrived. The two bowed and greeted as they entered. The Baron expressed his deep apologies for misunderstanding the two and made a special visit to apologize. This left Ellie a bit unsure of how to react. Ellie suddenly realized that the reason the Baron had focused so much on the mines after so long was probably because he was only concerned about his wife's health. If she could solve the Baron's concerns, could she make the sword for Damian sooner? Ellie accepted the Baron's apology but also made a request. I've heard that patients with Roman's disease often experience confusion. The louder the surroundings are, the more frightened they become, so Baron, please don't get angry with your wife in the future. The man was willing to come and apologize to the girl just because of his wife's words. Even though this girl was someone he greatly disliked, Ellie accepted the apology. At the same time, she made a request. She wanted to walk with the Baroness. She had just arrived at this place. And her only friend was Damian, but Damian would be busy with his swordsmanship lessons. So she hoped to spend time with the Baroness to relieve her boredom. Meeting 3 times a week would be enough. Ellie made this move to get the Baron to focus more on the mines, hoping to make the sword for Damian sooner. But the Baroness was worried that she might drag Ellie down if she had an episode. However, seeing the girl's sincere request, the Baroness happily agreed. That day, the two had afternoon tea together in the greenhouse garden. Ellie told the Baroness about her journey to the Duke's city. After learning about Ellie's past life, the Baroness felt some pity. She took Ellie's hand. You must have had a hard life before, right? Though Ellie tried to show she didn't care, the gentle care still touched her. She smiled and said it wasn't hard. The children at the orphanage are all good, and the evil teachers have all been dealt with by the Duke. The Baroness was a bit surprised. The Duke isn't one to meddle in other people's affairs, but he rescued Damian from the orphanage. At this moment, the Baroness seemed to hesitate, perhaps out of guilt. She began to tell Ellie the story about the Duke. Duke Schuetz and Damian's father, Duke Clyde, had met during a great war, and from then on they became close friends. The war was victorious, and the Empire successfully subdued the minority clans with magical powers. But on the day Duke Schuetz returned victorious, he brought back a woman named Yulia. It was a family from a minority clan, the Schuetz family. Due to a curse, the family members had been suffering from mania for generations. However, Yulia was able to use her spiritual power to treat the mania. Later, they got married, and their life together was happy and fulfilling. But using spiritual power had its side effects. 3 years later, the Duke had to go to war again. In order to completely eliminate the Duke's curse, Yulia eventually lost her life. After that, Duke Schuetz shut himself off and severed ties with the outside world. Only his friend, Duke Clyde, persistently wrote him letters. 2 years later, Damian was born. Duke Clyde shared the good news with Duke Schuetz, who then regained his spirit and reopened the closed gates. However, on their way to the Duke's castle, Duke Clyde and his wife were assassinated by the Emperor and both passed away. This was when Ellie finally understood why the Duke felt guilty toward Damian. She believed that if she hadn't invited them to come, such a tragedy wouldn't have happened. Ellie understood that feeling because she too had lost close family members. Seeing the silent girl, the Duchess thought she had frightened her. She gently stroked Ellie's hair and changed the topic. Our relationship reminds me of my son. However, he was no longer young and had been busy dealing with matters concerning the mine. As soon as Ellie heard about the mine, she immediately became excited. She asked the Duchess to take her to see the mine. The man frowned as if he could crush a fly with his expression. He had discovered new minerals but didn't know how to develop them. He hated himself for being useless. He couldn't make his sick mother happy, nor could he earn his father's approval. At this moment, the Baron suddenly appeared and asked about the progress of his son's project. His reaction said it all. The Baron initially wanted to comfort him, telling him it was okay and he could take his time. But Jard responded firmly, "I will work harder, I won't embarrass you." His distant attitude surprised the Baron. The comforting words were swallowed back and he turned around only to bump into Ellie. The Baron was surprised to see his wife and Ellie here. Wouldn't she be upset knowing Ellie came to such a dangerous place? He explained that she wanted to come see her son. At this moment, Ellie was already captivated by a short sword. Looking at it sparkling, Ellie wanted to touch it. With eager anticipation, she asked Jard, "Can I?" However, the man directly rejected her. "No, it's dangerous." Ellie instantly felt disappointed. Seeing Ellie's unhappy expression, the man felt a little guilty, but he said, "I can show you something else." The Baron was about to stop him but was stopped by his wife. Jard took out a monocle made from spiritual stones and told Ellie to put it on. To her surprise, as soon as she put it on, Ellie felt dizzy. Closing one eye made it better. The Duchess, watching the two of them happily interact, sighed, "If they had a granddaughter, it must feel like this." At that moment, Ellie saw a pile of blue mineral stones. Jard quickly warned her not to run. Because these special minerals would harden instantly when touched by people and would stick to the body, even releasing strange substances. Ellie was frightened. It was just like the monster Damian had seen before. Once you touched it, you couldn't get rid of it. Upon hearing this, Jard suddenly remembered the monster. He seemed to have encountered it when he was a child. Back then, he was just a little knight. He had seen minerals piled up on the roadside and was about to touch them. But others had told him that these were actually rare mineral monsters, deliberately sparkling to attract attention. Once you touched them, you couldn't shake them off. They could even burrow into the human body. This discovery led to a heated discussion between the Baron and his son. Ellie felt quite pleased that her subtle hints weren't in vain. They finally realized that this mine was actually the lair of a monster. Next, they would research how to use this monster to create weapons. Ellie was lost in thought when the Baroness came to take her back, although she hadn't had much time to talk with her son. Just being able to visit her was enough to satisfy her. The Baroness was very grateful to Ellie. This girl had not only helped her, but also greatly assisted her husband and son. She was like an angel. Because of the girl's humble background, even though the Duke supported her, she was still despised by the nobles. Fortunately, she won the Baroness's favor through her intelligence and resourcefulness. When the butler reported Ellie's situation to the Duke found the girl very clever. At that moment, the butler brought the Baron's latest sword. The material used was actually a type of monster that disguised itself as a mineral. The Duke was very satisfied with this result. But the butler mentioned that this was all thanks to Miss Ellie. It was her subconscious remark that made the Baron realize these stones were actually monsters. This caused the Duke to fall into deep thought when she first brought Ellie back. She suspected that Ellie was an agent of the Emperor, with the intention of winning over Damian to make him loyal to the royal family. If it turned out that Ellie really had ties to the Emperor, she would surely have to take action. But why did her mood worsen just from hypothesizing this? At that moment, the door of the room made a sound. The butler immediately pulled out a dagger and cautiously approached the door. The door opened and it was Ellie. That was a close call. She had only wanted to eavesdrop on the development progress and almost got caught. The Duke asked what was going on. Ellie held out a bag. "I came to bring you some medicine, Duke. I heard from the maid that you often suffer from headaches, so I brought you medicine for headaches." The butler praised her thoughtfulness. "Where did you get this medicine?" Ellie stammered. She couldn't exactly say it was the maid who had given it to her when she pretended to be sick. Ellie quickly changed the subject. "Butler, what's hidden behind you?" The butler swiftly threw the dagger aside, spreading his hands. "There's nothing at all." Ellie was about to hand the medicine to the butler. But the Duke snatched it away. "You came to see me not just for this, right?" "Well, you're too sharp." Ellie went straight to the point. She wanted to choose a family to adopt her. The Duke was puzzled. "The Baron is almost ready to accept you, and now you want to give up?" Ellie had thought the Duke would refuse. But to her surprise, he agreed and even asked which family Ellie wanted to join. The House of Hughes. "I want you to adopt me." She thought to herself that once she grew up, she would leave here, so she just wanted to be taken in for a while. But the Duke decisively refused. "Don't even think about it. I hate troublesome things, especially children." Rejected so bluntly, Ellie had no choice but to return to her room. Looking at the children's medicine Ellie had brought, the Duke couldn't help but laugh. This child actually thinks children's medicine can treat the headache caused by a curse. What is she trying to do? Even though he knew this girl might be an agent of the Emperor, why did he still find himself unable to stop caring about her? The girl, as the fiancée of a noble young master, spent her days thinking about how to escape. Ellie calculated the timeline of the plot. Damian would go to the battlefield in 4 years. The female lead would return 5 years after that. In these 9 years, she needed to plan her own escape, though her plan was to leave. She would continue to nurture Damian. One day, Ellie went to the training ground with the Baroness to visit Damian. Because Ellie helped greatly with the matter at the mine, as a reward, the Baron decided to personally guide Damian in construction. However, Ellie was a bit worried because the Baron had treated her poorly before. Damian harbored some dissatisfaction toward the Baron. To be on the safe side, she decided to communicate with him first. As soon as she opened the door, she saw Damian sitting on the floor. Ellie hurriedly ran over, asking if he was hurt.